Welcome. Let me begin with a moment so quiet, it almost doesn't sound like the end of a marriage. A phone rings in a hotel room late at night. A husband answers, expecting a normal conversation. Instead, he hears calm, steady words. "I'm divorcing you." No shouting, no tears. Just a decision that had been made long before that call. Tonight's story is not about betrayal or scandal. It is about distance. The kind that grows slowly when I am busy replaces I am here. And when love is assumed instead of shown. Because sometimes relationships don't break in one dramatic moment. They fade in the background. Until one day, one person realizes they've been alone for a very long time. Let's begin. She didn't make the decision in one dramatic moment. And that's what he would never fully understand. There was no single fight that pushed her over the edge. No shattered glass. No slammed doors. If he searched his memory later, he wouldn't be able to point to a specific day and say, that's when everything fell apart. For her, it was slower than that. Quieter. It was the gradual realization that she felt more alone sitting next to her husband than she did when she was actually by herself. In the early years of their marriage, she had admired his drive. She told her friends how hardworking he was, how dedicated, how he wanted to build a good life for them. She believed the late nights and constant travel were temporary sacrifices for a future they would enjoy together. When he missed dinners, she saved him a plate. When he forgot movie nights, she told herself he was just tired. She became an expert at making excuses for him, smoothing over disappointments before they had a chance to turn into arguments. But the temporary phase never ended. The late nights became normal. The business trips stretched longer. Important conversations were reduced to rushed phone calls between meetings. She would sit across from him at the table, telling him about her day, and watch his eyes flick down to his phone every few seconds. His body was there, but his mind was always somewhere else. With emails, deadlines, clients, goals, she started editing her stories, shortening them, until eventually she stopped telling them at all. The loneliness didn't arrive like a storm. It seeped in like fog. She felt it on birthdays he celebrated with a quick gift ordered online and a distracted hug. She felt it on anniversaries when he promised they'd do something special next weekend, a weekend that never seemed to come. She felt it most at night, lying in bed beside him while he answered just one more email. The blue light from his screen reflecting in the darkness between them. She tried, at first, to tell him how she felt. She chose her words carefully, not wanting to sound ungrateful. She told him she missed him, that she wanted more time together. He would pull her close, kiss her forehead, and promise things would slow down soon. He sounded sincere, and that made it harder to stay upset. She clung to those promises like lifelines, stretching her patience a little further each time. Eventually, she stopped bringing it up. Not because the pain went away, but because repeating herself made her feel small. Like she was begging for scraps of attention from the person who was supposed to choose her freely. She didn't want to nag. She didn't want to fight. So she adapted. She filled her time with hobbies, with friends, with quiet routines that didn't depend on whether he was home or not. Without meaning to, she began building a life that functioned perfectly well without him in it. The saddest part was that on the surface, their marriage looked stable. They didn't scream at each other. They didn't have dramatic scenes. If anyone had asked, she might even have said, "We're fine." But fine started to man. "I expect nothing, so I can't be disappointed." Her heart adjusted to the lower expectations the way eyes adjust to dim light. She stopped reaching for his hand because she already knew he would be checking his watch. She stopped waiting up for him because going to bed alone hurt less than hoping he'd come in early. By the time she finally said the words out loud that she wanted a divorce, she had already grieved the marriage in private. She had cried in the shower so he wouldn't hear. She had stared at old photos and felt like she was looking at strangers. She had imagined a future without him so many times that it no longer scared her. To him, the decision sounded sudden, cold, even cruel. To her, it felt like acknowledging something that had been true for a long time. She had been alone in that marriage for years, and she was simply ready for her outside life to match her inside reality. He said he had to travel again. It wasn't unusual, and that was the problem. He said it with the same casual tone he'd used for picking up groceries or getting gas, just another routine task. He promised it would be quick this time, just a few days. And when he got back, he said, they'd finally have that proper weekend together. I smiled and nodded, just like I always did. But inside, that familiar hollow feeling opened up in my chest. I'd heard those promises before, and I'd watched them fade away, replaced by something important more times than I could count. The morning he left, I stood by the door, holding his travel mug while he ran through a mental checklist. Laptop, charger, documents. He kissed my cheek, but his mind was already at the airport. I wanted to say, "Don't go." Not because of the trip, but because I needed him to choose me, just once, without hesitation. Instead, I just handed him the mug and said, "Have a safe flight." The door closed, and the house fell into a silence that felt heavier than usual. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. It was only a few days. I kept busy with errands, laundry, and a doctor's appointment I had scheduled weeks ago. I'd reminded him about it twice, hoping he might offer to reschedule his trip, or at least ask how it went later. The morning of the visit, I drove myself, sat alone in the waiting room, and scrolled through old messages from him. They used to be filled with heart emojis, and "miss you already." Now, our conversations were just logistics, flight times, meeting updates, bill reminders. After the appointment, I checked my phone. No message. No missed call. I pictured him in a conference room, laughing with colleagues over lunch, his phone face down on the table. He's just busy. Premeta told myself, it doesn't mean he doesn't care. But a quiet voice in my head asked a question I could not ignore anymore. If something truly mattered to you, wouldn't you find 30 seconds to check in? That evening, I saw a photo he posted online. He was at a long dinner table with his team, smiling, glasses raised in a toast. The caption mentioned, "Great people and big wins." I stared at the picture, noticing how relaxed he looked, how present. I couldn't remember the last time he looked at me across the table with that same attention. It wasn't jealousy. It was the realization that he still had energy to give jest. Not at home. I didn't cry. Instead, a strange calm washed over me. The kind of calm you feel when a doubt you've carried for so long finally becomes a certainty. I walked through the house that night, noticing all the small details. The chair where he always dropped his jacket. The permanent indent on his side of the bed from late-night scrolling. I realized the space already felt like it belonged to one person. I had been adjusting to his absence for so long that his physical presence had become the exception, not the rule. When he called later, his voice was upbeat, full of stories about presentations and deals. He asked how I was, but in that distracted way, expecting the answer fine. So I gave it to him. Fine. I didn't mention the appointment. I didn't mention the photo. I didn't mention the distance between us that now felt like an ocean. And as he talked, I understood with painful clarity. This trip wasn't the cause of the end. It was the proof. Proof that even when nothing was technically wrong, everything essential was already missing. While he measured progress in promotions and performance reviews, she began measuring hers in documents signed, accounts opened, and quiet steps toward independence. There was no dramatic declaration that she was preparing to leave. No sudden shift in behavior that would have alerted him. On the surface, she remained the same polite, supportive, asking about his flights and reminding him to pack a jacket. Underneath, however, her focus had changed. She was no longer trying to fix the marriage. She was trying to make sure she would be okay without it. It started with information. One afternoon, while he was away on another trip, she sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and searched for a divorce lawyer. Her hands trembled at first, not because she doubted her feelings, but because typing those words made everything feel real. She expected to feel guilt or panic. Instead, she felt a quiet sense of relief, like finally turning on a light in a room she'd been stumbling through in the dark. She booked a consultation using her personal email, choosing a time she knew he'd be in meetings. The lawyer didn't push her to make any decisions. He simply explained her options. What separation would look like, how assets might be divided, what steps she should take to protect herself financially. She listened carefully, taking notes, asking practical questions. For the first time in years, she was planning a future that depended entirely on her own stability, not on hoping he would change. After that, she opened a bank account in her own name. It felt strangely rebellious, even though it was a basic act of adulthood. She set up small transfers from the household funds, amount subtle enough not to raise questions, but steady enough to build a safety net. Each notification from the bank gave her a flicker of reassurance. She wasn't being reckless. She was being prepared. She thought about all the nights she had lain awake, worrying about what would happen if she ever had to stand on her own. Now she was quietly answering that fear with action. She updated her resume next. It had been years since she last touched it. Reading through her old experience, she remembered parts of herself that had been buried under routines and compromises. She applied for a few positions, telling herself she was just exploring. When interview requests started coming in, she scheduled them during hours he would never notice her absence. In those conversations, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Seen for her abilities, not just her role as someone's wife. The house was the hardest step. Not emotionally, she had already detached from it in many ways, but logistically, he loved the idea of owning property. Talked about it as an investment, a symbol of success. Yet he was rarely there to enjoy it. She contacted a real estate agent and learned the market was good. As they walked through the rooms, discussing listing prices and staging, she realized most of the memories tied to the place were solitary ones. Quiet breakfasts, evenings waiting, weekends spent alone while he traveled. Selling it didn't feel like destroying a dream. It felt like releasing a shell that had never truly been home. Every move she made was deliberate and calm. She didn't act out of anger or a desire to punish him. In fact, she avoided confrontation at all costs. She knew that if she announced her plans too early, it would promise to change to 3 are there, to be more present. And maybe part of him would mean it. But she also knew she didn't have the strength to go through another cycle of hope, followed by disappointment. So she chose silence, not as revenge, but as protection for the fragile resolve she was building. By the time she made the call, her heart was no longer racing. The fear had already burned through her in private moments while meeting the lawyer, while signing the forms, while watching strangers walk through the house she once called home. What remained now was a steady, almost detached calm. She wasn't calling to argue or to convince him of anything. She was simply calling to inform. She chose a time when she knew he'd be back in his hotel room after a long day of work. She could picture him loosening his tie, half checking emails, half watching television. Those anonymous hotel rooms, with their generic art and the constant hum of the air conditioner, had become more familiar to him than their own living room. The thought didn't sting anymore. It just felt like a fact. When he answered, his voice was warm, expecting an easy, end-of-day conversation. He probably thought she was calling to say goodnight. She let him finish his first sentence before she spoke, her voice even and unshaken. She'd rehearsed the words in her mind so many times, they felt almost ordinary. "I'm divorcing you," she said. "I've sold the house. The papers will be emailed to you tomorrow." There was a pause, the kind where you assume you misheard. He laughed softly, a confused sound, and asked what she meant. She repeated herself, just as calm, just as clear. She didn't list grievances or bring up old fights. Those battles were years old, and she had already fought them alone in her head, over and over again. On his end, the silence grew heavy. She could picture him sitting down on the edge of the hotel bed, phone pressed tightly to his ear, trying to connect this composed woman with the wife he believed would always wait, always forgive, always understand. His words began to trip over each other. "When did this happen? Why didn't you tell me? We can fix this. I'll come home. I'll cancel my meetings." She listened without interrupting, the way she used to listen when he talked about deadlines and clients. But this time, his urgency didn't move her. She had already lived through the stage where his promises sounded like hope. Now, they just sounded like echoes from a marriage she had already buried. She gently told him that she had tried for a long time, that she was tired, and that this decision wasn't sudden. Her calmness unsettled him more than anger ever could have. Anger would have meant there was still something to fight for. Her steadiness felt like a closed door. He started apologizing, his voice cracking in a way she hadn't heard in years. But each apology landed in a space inside her that no longer existed. She felt a flicker of sadness, not for the marriage they had, but for the one they never managed to build. When the call ended, she didn't collapse or cry. She simply set her phone down. Her hands were steady. The house, soon to be someone else's, already felt different, less like a place of waiting, more like a place she was just passing through. For the first time in a very long while, The silence around her didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. A peace she had finally allowed herself to claim. Thanks for watching. The end of a relationship can feel like the world is crumbling. For a while, that's exactly how it felt. The silence in the apartment was deafening. A constant reminder of what was lost. In those quiet moments, I had two choices. Let the emptiness consume me, or start filling it with something new. Something that was just for me. Chose me. This wasn't about a dramatic revenge makeover, or showing someone what they were missing. It was quieter, more personal. It started with small things. I finally bought that ridiculously bright yellow teapot I'd always wanted, even though he would have said it was too much. I started waking up early, not to an alarm, but to the sun, and spending the first moments of the day with a cup of tea and my own thoughts. I revisited old hobbies I'd let slide. My dusty sketchbook came off the shelf, and I started drawing again. Not for anyone's approval, but for the simple joy of creating. I went on long walks by myself, exploring new neighborhoods in my city, discovering hidden cafes and little parks I'd never noticed before. Each new discovery felt like I was reclaiming a piece of the world, making it my own. I learned to cook new recipes, filling my home with the warm smells of spices and fresh bread. Friends would come over, not to rehash the past, but to share a meal and laughter in my newly reclaimed space. I wasn't just surviving. I was building a life that felt authentically mine. A life filled with peace and quiet confidence. There was no grand finale, no moment where I suddenly declared myself healed. Instead, it was a gradual dawning, like a slow sunrise. One morning, I woke up and realized the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. It was filled with possibility. This journey wasn't about forgetting what happened, but about building something so beautiful and strong in its place. But the past no longer had the power to define me. It was about learning that the most profound love story you can ever live is the one you write with yourself. If you're going through something similar, be gentle with yourself. The quiet path back to you is the most rewarding one you'll ever take. Thanks for watching. Not every marriage ends with shouting, slammed doors, or dramatic betrayals. Sometimes it ends in silence, in unanswered calls, in dinners eaten alone, in feelings that go unheard for so long that they finally stop trying to be heard at all. He thought nothing was terribly wrong because nothing was loudly wrong. But love doesn't usually disappear in an explosion. It fades in the spaces where effort used to live, and when one person keeps choosing work, distractions, or later, eventually the other person chooses themselves. Her leaving wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing him or proving a point. It was about reaching a moment where staying hurt more than walking away. By the time she said the words out loud, her heart had already packed its bags. The real lesson here is simple and uncomfortable. The absence of conflict does not mean the presence of connection. The most dangerous distance in a relationship is the quiet kind, where one person slowly learns how to live without the other while still sharing the same name, the same house, the same life on paper. If this story made you reflect, if it reminded you to check in, to listen, to be present before silence replaces conversation, then it's already done something important. Thank you for listening, and if you want more stories that reveal the quiet truths behind relationships, don't forget to subscribe and join me for the next one.